I'm not sure. I don't know.
All right.
So,
This is Conscious Community Connection, and we are here live tonight again. WRFU 104.5 FM. The views expressed by the speakers are those of the speakers, not of WRFU 104.5 RCIMC Socialist Forum. We will be discussing this evening. We are working on our fourth part, and this is focusing on racism. And we are really what we're trying to do is uncover what exactly it is. So tonight, our discussion, this fourth part, is about structural racism, right? Correct?
mhm.
Institutional racism. I'm sorry. We cover structural racism. I'm sorry. The institutional racism. So we want to uncover more of how that looks, and we feel the reason why this is important is because that according to like Neely Fuller and Dr. Francis Cress Wilson, if you think you understand it, it's only designed to confuse you. It really is, and the ones who are participating in it are usually confused by it as well. This is how it's able to stand so long. How are we still fighting the same fight? And I was just watching a tape, a Black Power tape from the 60s that were having the same issues as we are today. So that means that either one, we're not doing a good job fighting this fight, or we don't understand it. That's why, and I think we don't understand it. And we're gonna talk more about that later. Like we mostly coming from a reactionary standpoint. But I got my lovely host on here, Miss Alicia. She's on here today, and she's been doing an excellent job with these presentations. Thank you, Alicia.
Thank you.
All right, yeah, but I'm not going. I want to come in on the end, but I want to hear more of this presentation, and we need to uncover this thing. Let's pull a sheet off let's pull the hood off this sheet. You know what I'm talking about? The little hood. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, like Tiger was saying, well, first of all, I want to thank you all for coming and listening and participating in this with us. We work to strive to try to bring awareness to something that none of us really quite understand. Um, uh, but like I said, we're doing our best to try to understand it. So everything that I present to you guys is something that I'm doing research on to help myself understand it better. So I really would appreciate if you guys have anything extra to add. Please feel free to add that in the chat and share your knowledge so that we all can be growing together on the same level in the same way. So last time when we talked about institutional racism, well, one thing it's like institutional racism, structural racism is used like interchangeably, and even systematic racism too. Although they can be used interchangeably because, like was stated previous in other discussions, that our institutions are part of our structure. However, structural racism has a lot more to do with the history of things and in our culture as a whole, as well as the laws and policies. And that's where the institutional part comes in. So that's why they're so how they can be so intertwined, but they have some distinct differences, because institutions are more specific to the laws and the policies and the organizations and organization culture. So just to kind of recap on what we talked about last time, we talked about institutional racism and as it pertains to police conduct. And I went over an article and I discussed with you guys this article that talked about the actual correlation that was found between structural or institutional racism and fatal police shootings. And then they did an analysis state by state and they also measured the racial discrepancies between black and white unarmed victims of those shootings. And their findings were they actually did find that there was more unarmed black adults that were shot fatally by the police
Wow.
than whites. So I thought that was interesting because there's a lot of people going around saying that there's a lot of people going around saying that white people are shot and are killed more by the police than black people, but there's a correlation there. There's a correlation there, and it talks about like state by state, it's that the percentage is higher when it comes to structural racism and the correlation of that to police shootings with black unarmed adults. So, I mean, pretty much if you're in a state where your institutions or the state culture or policies are very structured, embedded with structural racism, there's a great chance that you could be shot if you are an unarmed black adult over a white unarmed adult. That's pretty much what it was saying. So I posted that link on the Conscious Community Connections Facebook page. I encourage people to read it because it's pretty astonishing that that's how it's going. And I thought this was interesting too. They had a table of like they put the states in order, and Wisconsin was number one. And right after I did that presentation, or right after I did that discussion with you guys, I think literally it was like the next week or a couple weeks later, there was a killing in Kenosha. Wow. That was really interesting. And Minnesota was number two, and that's where George Floyd died. I can't remember what number three was, but Illinois was number four. So, I mean, I'm thinking about, maybe Illinois, there might be a killing that might be happening in Illinois that might hit the news soon. Maybe. I mean, hope not. I hope not. But if it does, then it really is saying something about, what was found in that article. So anyway, that's just what we took. What are we saying?
So you say right after you did that presentation, that's when the one, wow.
Yeah. Wow. And it was pretty interesting that I was like, wow, I just talked about this. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, the information is out there. We just have to put in the time to read and look for it. And, we have to be willing to have these conversations even when they're uncomfortable, so that we know what's going on in our society. Right. If our society is embedded with racism, shouldn't we know? I mean, so where we live, should we know about what's dictating our lives and our behavior towards each other? That's how I look at it.
I think it's so encompassing that it goes unnoticed. It's almost like a fish in water. It's just there. So eventually, when you start seeing something that's there repetitive like that, your mind will block it out. Until something like this show up, like a shooting or something else. But until then, everything you will adjust to it. And I know you reading the book right now, The Color of Law. Mm-hmm. So these neighborhoods were built like that on purpose. But we're gonna get into that. But go ahead, we're gonna get into that.
I'm just commenting to. I'm responding to a comment that somebody made on here.
I can't see the comment.
You don't see the comments? You're not on your phone?
Let me see if I get on there. Go ahead.
Okay, well, Jade said, she said, I believe the moment you look at a person for who they are, you might make them worse than they are. That's true. But the moment you look at that person for what they potentially could be, then you make them better than they are. And that's true. And I get what you're saying. And I think that it could actually go both ways, when you're talking about subtle forms of racism. We talked about that last time as well. When subtle forms of racism, where there's like it's embedded with stereotypes and being naive and ignorant about other people, and that's how people start using microaggressions, right? You say things
Mm-hmm.
out of your mouth and you have no idea that you're being, disrespectful, or you have no idea that you're looking at that person in a negative way. But,
Yeah.
Jade, please let me know if I'm explaining that correctly, if I've commented correctly on that. I'm sorry if I did it.
What
Oh,
up, Jay?
that
Jay, my
is a
man.
guy. My bad.
Yeah, Jay.
My bad.
Jay, that's a bad guy. I know that guy. He a good. He
Okay.
coming on the show too. The dude do magic and everything. He's a bad guy, man. You
Oh
gonna love
dang! I'm so sorry, and I can't see I can't see your profile picture. I don't be going by profile pictures anyway. People be having pictures of who and
him.
whatever up on there.
Yeah,
So, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
man.
I'm so sorry. But yeah, so like I said, this week we're going to talk about institutional racism and how it pertains to social work. This is really important to talk about, I think, because we're already talking about defunding the police department and adding social workers in, and we just talked about how the criminal justice system is an institution itself that has racism in it, because all institutions have racism in it. And now we're going to put another institution with that is also
Mm-hmm.
racist. So, I mean, I think it's important to talk about that. It's important to acknowledge that the only reason why we're talking about defunding police departments all over the nation, and it's supposed to be happening here as well. That the only reason why we're talking about it is because of a racist issue, an act, a murder that happened, Floyd dying. Then people started saying, "Oh, well, the police aren't just inflicting brutal, violent tactics on people of color; they're also doing it to all marginalized groups." And this is a problem for all marginalized groups. And why are they doing that? Well, because they lack awareness. They don't know how to deal with individuals who have mental health problems and have mental health issues. They don't know how to deal with people who have intellectual disabilities. For instance, we've heard for so many years, or throughout the years, that people on the autism spectrum have been shot and killed by the police because the police didn't understand their behaviors. And so they said, well, you need social workers to get involved to be a part of that and to calm those situations down, which is true to a certain extent. It is true. However, we are forgetting that the whole reason why we're even having this talk and conversation is because of a racist problem. And so while we're sitting over here trying to fix behavioral crisis and mental health crisis, we're forgetting about the racist problem over here. And if we forget about that altogether, then we're not really fixing the problem at
Mm-hmm.
all. We're just kind of ignoring a big part of it. So that's why I figured it was important to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
yeah. So let me share my screen and then we can start.
You know, we should, and I apologize for not putting a flyer out about this one. We should have had the flyer out for our marketing, but it's okay.
Oh, hold on. Hold on, y'all. Mm, I don't know why. Here we go. Here we go.
Yeah, while you get that together, Jade had made a comment. I'm gonna read it while you pull that. You got it? Okay.
Mm-mm.
I think it's starting.
Hold up.
Oh,
Let me try again. It's not. Go ahead and read your comment or read the comment. I'm trying to.
it was just Jade. He was just talking about. He said basically, it's more so that even though a person does wrong, that don't mean they are bad. Said Black Lives Matter too. Some have clouded the minds and have given others a bad image. But if you can look past that, and it's a little bit more. But I get what Jade is saying, and going back to what brother Kendi was talking about, you really can't just target somebody almost like that, because certain things will be, let's say they'll be racist on, like such as incarceration. Then other um, other concepts, ideologies, they won't be racist on. So it's hard to just label somebody. Like Kendi said, there's no such thing as a non-racist, but you can be a racist or either anti-racist, which is different. And a lot of individuals, well, again, according to Kendi, it's two type of races. You got the race producers and the one that's consumers. So the race producers are the ones that's creating these policies, but the race consumers are the ones that's benefiting from it. On that note, I'm gonna let you start your slideshow because I can see it. It came up now. So go ahead, Alicia.
Okay. All right. We can go back to that when we open back up to discussion.
Yeah.
So I want to just review the definition of institutional racism, which is a little bit. This definition is a little bit different from the definition that I shared last time, but I think it relates a little bit more to what we're talking about today. So, institutional racism is the manifestation of racism in social systems and institutions. It is the social, economic, educational, and political forces of policies that operate to foster discriminatory outcomes. It is the combination of policies, practices, or procedures embedded in the bureaucratic structure that systematically lead to unequal outcomes of groups of people. So it's pretty, I mean, that's pretty straightforward
So go
definition.
back. It
Mm-hmm.
said leads to an unequal,
Outcome,
what is it? Outcome.
outcomes for groups of people. So
And that's the policies. Those are
that's,
most of the policies that we're facing. Yep.
yep. Yeah, it is. And like I said, it's the manifestation of it in social systems, institutions, and institutions also include private organizations. So your place of work, and
Mm.
specifically in your your work culture and what goes on there. So that's what's so interesting about this is because you know when you're talking about structural racism, it's very broad, it's overall, right? It's all
Mhm.
encompassing of everything. But institutional racism really talks about, you know, it affects your livelihood pretty directly. And when it's talking about your place of work, you know, I mean, we spend most of our time at work. And so when you're in an environment that can be toxic or can be troubling or
Mhm.
what's the word? Where it doesn't allow you to live up to your fullest potential or help you grow
Right.
in your field, you know, how do you think what does that do to you as a person? You know, and we're dealing with this on a regular basis. So, I
Well,
mean, go ahead.
we usually eternalize it and we just shrug it off as this just how it is.
Yeah, internalize it.
That comes to moving up. You can't move up in your job. You be stuck, or you'll see other people, get raises and different things, getting a different pay. The wealth gap is growing, not only
Yeah.
for the races, but for the sexes as well. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
women are falling
Oh yeah.
behind now due to COVID.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, institutional racism um, created the glass ceiling. And because that is in existence, we have affirmative action. We wouldn't need it if we didn't have institutional racism, you know, but we
Right,
still check boxes when we apply for a job. You know, we're an equal opportunity employer. Please check what race you are. Why does
right,
it matter if I'm qualified? Or how about you just give me a job interview and figure it out? You know,
right, right,
you just interview me
right,
and figure that out, you know? But, you know, you
right.
put that on the application. So I just think that's really interesting. It's really interesting.
That is.
Yeah. So, so also to recap on last week and to just talk a little bit more about your personal workplace because I want everybody, I think it would be good for everybody. You don't got to if you don't want to, but I think it would be beneficial for everybody because I've done this before myself. I've actually tried to pinpoint or to try to see the subtle forms of racism in my work, in my place of work, and how how they play out. Because there's subtle forms of racism, but this can also be subtle forms of discrimination as well. There's forms of like I said, everybody uses microaggressions. So,
Right.
determine whether or not you're actually the perpetrator or the victim behind this. You can be on both sides of this coin, actually, you know. But I think it's important to kind of recognize it so that you can figure out individually. You can figure out what you want to do with it. Do you want to address it to stop it? Address it, like, hold on, tell your work colleague they're being discriminatory or racist, or you don't got to address it if you don't want to. You just want to be able to acknowledge it and recognize it when it goes down. It's up to you. Or maybe you, like I said, or just to make sure you're not being the perpetrator yourself. So yeah, so I just wanted to put this up here so that we can talk a little bit, just to kind of give a reminder of what these are and how this can actually come out in your work field that doesn't necessarily have to be social work. So so let's talk a little bit more about social work in specific. Okay, so social work is a field in which its primary goal is to enhance the human well-being. And social workers are meant to be sensitive to cultural and ethic diversity. And social work is supposed to strive towards ending discrimination, oppression, poverty, and other forms of social injustice. So that's what social workers are supposed to do. That's what the social work field is about. That is actually specifically stated in the social work code of ethics. There's the part right before you get into the ethics that's called the preamble, and that is stated in that preamble. So that's ethically what the field is about and what social workers are supposed to be about. The profession is considered a helping profession. So that's what social workers do. They assess the needs of the community or the population of whoever they're working with, and then they help that population or that community fulfill their needs. They're supposed to be helping. Mm-hmm. I thought it was really interesting when I was researching this that I found a research paper written by the NSAW, that's the National Association of Social Workers, the Washington D.C. chapter, in which that paper talked about how this helpfulness that social workers or the social work field does, it actually reduces the pressure on the larger society for social change. So in a way, it's almost like enabling the society at large to not, they don't have to become consciously aware, or they don't have to work towards social justice, because social workers are kind of doing it for them. So to explain, so this is how I interpreted it. To explain, because I thought it was really interesting. To explain about that, it's almost like right now we have a social justice problem with the police not understanding certain marginalized groups, right?
Right.
So
Right.
we're going to put the social workers involved, get them involved to do that. But what really should be happening is that while the social workers are doing that, we need to urge and promote that the society at large, but in specifically the police, to gain psychoeducation to learn about those marginalized populations themselves. Because just because social workers are going to be involved, it doesn't mean that police won't have to deal with people with mental illness. Doesn't mean, yeah. So it's kind of like, almost like, in a sense, it's almost like, well, since they aren't quite being correct when dealing with those particular types of people, we're just going to make sure social workers just deal with them. You get what I'm saying? It's kind of
I
an
see.
enabling thing. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you're saying that there need to be a cultural training or cultural awareness piece into this training for both groups, social workers and law enforcement, right?
Absolutely. I mean, everybody, society at large needs to be, trying to, if we're talking about everyone being responsible for their own learning into to cultural competency, but I mean, I'm sure not everybody's going to do that, but really, that's really what it is. What they're saying there, but in specifically, if when we're doing for this example, when dealing with the police, yes, the police need to be getting their own education on it. They should not be allowed to stay culturally unaware just because
Hmm.
social workers are coming in here now. No, you are still going to work with the community. You're still working with the broader public. You still need to obtain cultural competency. You see what I'm
Mhm.
saying? So I thought that was interesting. Also, as it is social work's, mission to strive to end discrimination, other forms of social injustice. But the same forces that promote the social injustice also promote white privilege. So when we're trying to strive to end those forms of social injustice, we will actually be striving to end white privilege as well. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. The
Mhm.
National Association of Social Work is a predominantly white association. So in order
Women.
for this, so yeah, so in order for this
Mhm.
to work, um, the 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 executive leaders, the board members within social work, they need to address and admit to their own white privilege, and then they would have to commit to taking consistent action towards dismantling social injustice. So they would have to make sure that they're
Mhm.
they're 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 going to commit to taking action into or obtaining social injustice for
Hmm.
because the only way that you're gonna be able to get social justice for people of color is
Mhm.
you if they make a commitment to do that. You get what I'm saying? If
I
they're
get what you're saying. Now,
so
my
if,
question is, how realistic is that? Because people come in to a job, and we talked about this earlier, with their own biases, right?
yeah, yeah. Well, so then I'm just gonna say this: you got to, if you're gonna be ethical, because it's a part of the social work code of ethics to do that.
Okay.
If the only way to end forms of social injustice, because we're supposed to be striving to end that, right?
Right.
If the only way to do that is to address white privilege, then that's what you got to do. Otherwise, you're not being ethical. It's contradictory to what social work is supposed to be doing. Social work is contradicting itself. You
Okay.
get what I'm saying?
I get
Every
it.
every social work agency that doesn't focus on cultural competency is being
Mhm.
unethical. Every social worker out here working in the field, if they aren't striving to become more competent culturally, then they're being unethical because that's what you're supposed to be doing. And if you cannot address your own white privilege to in order to dismantle these forms of social injustice, then you are not truly enhancing the human well-being. You get what I'm saying?
I get it.
So that's why it's really important to look at this. And people don't really necessarily understand this because they look at social work as the helping field. And social workers are meant to be objective and to push their own biases aside. Literally, we're told to do that. Push your bias aside so that you can be objective. How? How?
How you do
We're
it?
human. We're human
Yeah.
beings. You
Yeah.
can't. You
Eddie,
can't. yeah, you have to gain awareness to do that. And,
Right.
and if you ain't gaining awareness, if you ain't working towards finding awareness in that, that's not happening. That's not happening.
Right. Eddie
So
said, oh, go ahead. I was going to read what Eddie said on that to agree with you on that.
go ahead, go ahead.
Eddie said the problem with that is the need for personal accountability and the mental block of cognitive dissonance. Just what you said,
Yeah,
you know. So I agree
absolutely.
with him.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Exactly what it is. So, like I said, when I was doing this research, I found this research paper that was able to give several different situations that demonstrate institutional racism within social work. I picked six of those situations that I've seen play out in Champaign County, and then
Mhm.
gave examples of those instances. And I picked the examples that most identified or were very similar to the situations that I dealt with. So just to let everybody to let everybody know that if they don't know, I've been a social worker in Champaign County for about 15 years. So I started in the field early 20s. I was one of those kids that always knew what they wanted to be when they grew up. And so when I had the chance to get into the field, I did. I started really early. And I've worked within Champaign County as well as several other counties in the state of Illinois, and I occupied a variety, various different roles in the field, in a multitude of agencies. So all the experiences that I have had, it was interesting that I had them, and then they were here, then used and depicted here in this one article that was written by the Washington D.C. chapter, and
Mm.
I'm here in Illinois. So that to me says that if it's happening here and then Washington, then the chapter in Washington D.C. says it's happening, then it's probably happening throughout the whole entire field. So um, let me just read through these situations for you, and then I'll give you guys a scenario and kind of help you understand what it looks like in the field. So the first situation is when support is given to policy and practices without analysis of racial effect. So what that would look like is
Mhm.
say there's an African American clinician who's very experienced in the field, and they work in a mental health agency or work in an agency within a mental health program, and
Okay.
they find that the assessments within that program they're not it's not adequately assessing the Black families and the children, and it isn't considering the positive social cultural aspects of the families. And when that social worker would address these concerns with the white leaders, the social worker would be told that she's missing or he's missing the clinical aspects of what is involved. So pretty much what that's saying is, to break that
Mhm. Break
down,
it down. Yeah, break
huh?
it down for us.
Break it. Okay, so
Break
let
it
me break.
down for us. Yeah.
Yeah. So these positive cultural, social cultural aspects that could be not being assessed or acknowledged by the assessments or by the workers within the Black community. Well, that could be any type of strength at all that Black families possess. So, say strength within spirituality, religion. Maybe the particular families in this community have a lot of strong ties to, like, the local churches.
Okay.
It's important to be able to recognize the strengths, especially if you're using a strength based approach. And
Smart.
you need to recognize all of the strengths. Those strengths are used to empower the family to reach self determination. And that's the goal, to empower people to reach self determination,
Right.
and
Right.
to
That makes
help them
sense.
help themselves reach their own goals and fulfill their own needs. You don't want them to be dependent on you and
Right.
your services. You want them to be independent. So that's what that's for. And if you aren't, you know, taking into account all of the things that are considered a strength in that cultural group, then you're missing it. And the although the services that you will be providing could be effective, but man, how much more effective could they be if you were acknowledging all the aspects and all the strengths that they have?
Instead of just focusing on the weaknesses, right?
Or yeah, right. Well, that's what a strength-based approach is focusing on the strengths. But in this particular situation, it's saying that when the African American social worker who's experienced in her field, she's coming to the leaders of the program who happen to be white, and she's saying, "Hey, we aren't acknowledging certain strengths within the Black families." And the
Right.
leaders aren't listening to her because they're looking at her and saying, well, you're just saying that because you're Black. That's what that is.
Wow.
Okay. So that's what that is. So
Wow.
another instance would be, or another situation would be board leaders and memberships and executive leaders in leadership and management positions are occupied predominantly by white people, even in situations that serve predominantly populations of color. So this is really true. There's always like there will be a nonprofit organization, or there'll be like the mental health board or something like that, where it's predominantly white, but then they're like giving services to like populations or communities of color. And
Okay.
you see what I'm saying? That's an issue because they might not be in touch with that community, not quite understanding the issues of that community because they don't understand that the cultural aspects of the community, right?
Right.
So what agencies will do is that they will hire a non-white social worker. Say this is like we'll just stick with this Black and white. Say this is a Black neighborhood or a Black community, or the board or the leadership team of an agency recognizes that maybe the Black community isn't quite getting the services or aren't really benefiting from the services as they could. And so what they do is that they would hire a Black administrator to come in to help the organization move towards becoming more diverse and multicultural, right? And so when doing that, the administrator, then the Black administrator, might be expected to address these issues of diversity without the executive leadership and board members assuming greater responsibility for themselves. So when you have a board of white people who aren't taking responsibility for their own white privilege,
Right.
they're not going to take what that Black administrator is saying seriously. And they might say things like, you're too sensitive. Or they might say things like cultural aspects. Or there's clinical aspects. You're not taking into account the clinical aspects, those things. So that could happen. So, you're hiring somebody to come in here to help you move towards that. But if you're not, again, like I said before, if people aren't dealing with their own white privilege, and if they aren't making a commitment to that, then you ain't going nowhere. And you're not really doing anything. And that's frustrating, and it puts more frustration in work, and it also puts the administrator that was hired to do just that in a very uncomfortable situation. Like, sometimes this happens, and you'll see a board, like maybe a panel, and there'll be like a lot of white people on there, and then there'll be like one Black person up on there, and that Black person is supposed to kind of meant to help everybody be more diverse, understand cultural diversity, right? The community might get mad at that one Black person because they feel like that one Black person isn't doing their job on that board, which in fact maybe they are, but they're just dealing with people that aren't willing to address their own white privilege. Please let me know if you're understanding where I'm going with that. I'm
I
trying to
understand.
Okay.
I've seen this model several times.
Yeah.
Now it's making sense. Everything
Yeah.
that you're saying is making so much sense. So
Yeah.
But I'm gonna let you get to your third example before I make my comment.
Okay, so the third example is when investments in the development of knowledge about people in the communities of color is limited. Now, though, so this listen to this example. So, say if the state of Illinois mandates that social welfare, just social service agencies have to do cultural competency awareness, cultural competency training. So the agencies will then say here in Champaign, we'll have like an annual cultural competency training that consists of like an 8 hour long training session. So this is once a year, 8 hours. And it'll just kind of go over the overview of what cultural competency is, and they'll have maybe have stories from the community and you know stories of people and stuff like that, right? But see the workers that have you know been in that agency for several years, they'll get bored because they're hearing the same information over again, over again, over again, year after year, because the agency hasn't taken the time or put into the effort to, you know, really make the training count. You know, they're using the same material over again and over again. You know, and so maybe the workers then don't even take it that seriously because it's just the same stuff. That's a problem to only have one workshop the whole entire year. When with cultural competency, this is something that you need to do. You need to have several different follow-up workshops, maybe one a quarter. Okay, because you're trying to learn something. It's like this: when you're learning a different language, they say to move to that country where that language is spoken. Get
Exactly.
immersed into it so that you can really understand it. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. If you're not going to be immersed into it, you ain't really going to grasp it. So the problem with only having one workshop for 8 hours once a year isn't really doing anything. It's not really doing anything, especially when the staff members aren't expected to develop a personal professional development plan and plan in relationship to cultural competency. They're really not expected to now go out here and you know really try to figure out how to use this information in your personal life or your professional life so you can you know heighten your awareness. You know they're not really doing that because there's no programmatic effort to link with the various cultural communities on an ongoing basis. So you don't need, you get what I'm saying? So there is no push to really do that, you know? So there's no push to do that. However, I do want to say this. That the National Association of Social Work back in 2002, they did subscribe to cultural competency guidelines. So, you know, we are supposed to be doing that on an individual basis and as an agency. We are supposed to be doing these things. But look, I'm trying to tell you that if it isn't pushed to do that, people aren't going to do that. How many people are actually going to go out of their comfort zone? How many people are actually going to be like, I don't know anything about Indian culture, and I'm going to talk to my Indian friend, and I want her to tell me about her culture and tell me about her language, you know, or I'm, you know what I'm saying? Like, I really wanted to, how many people are actually going to do that? I mean, you know what I mean? It's awkward to do in the first place to say
What
like,
I see what happening is they become judgmental because they start seeing similar issues and then they immediately jump into, well, this is wrong with them and this is wrong. And
yeah,
that's the
those,
problem, especially dealing with, you know, I got a social service background, well, education. So, and we talked about a couple of cases, and one of the cases was a young man. It was an Asian culture, and it was different from him. So, you know, he had to learn how to adjust to that. But to have somebody just jump into a culture and you don't get it, how this culture work, because then this same individual worked with a it was like a African American culture, and it was a shock to him because it was two different value systems.
Mm-hmm.
Not saying that one is better than the other one, it's just different.
Right.
So
Right.
right, indeed, if you don't understand it or coming from a standpoint of you're an outsider looking in, then you will look and say, well, you just need to do this and do that, and you'll fix this problem.
Right.
You start what's the name of that? It's a term for that, where you start trying to tell the individual what's right and what's wrong instead of listening to instead of listening to the individual telling you what's wrong and how they can maybe fix the problem.
Mm-hmm.
You become more of a director, and that's not good.
Right, because the whole thing is to empower your client to reach self-determination so they aren't rely on you no more. And if you telling them
Right,
how to do everything, then you're actually, you know, enabling the whole situation. But also this, you can be really, it can be offensive, and condescending, especially if you're working with adults, you know, or even
right,
even with if you've ever worked with teenagers, you know what I'm saying? And
yeah.
and teenagers with issues of oppositional defiant disorder and conduct disorder, good luck in telling them what to do. You know,
And I think you see
you
that.
know,
I think you see that now here in Unit 4 school system. They got sued because they see a lot of the black males as aggressive,
mm-hmm.
but they're not taking. But then you got mostly Caucasian young white teachers, and so they already coming in with a biased perception.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so
Yep.
now once the kid stands up for itself, because coming from a background of inner city, you have to stand up for yourself. You speak with authority. You learn how to. But this is taken as aggression that other cultures, and they look at it as he's being hostile.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right.
Right.
Or maybe disrespectful because maybe in their culture they're taught not to look you in the eye when adults are authority, you know.
And that was the part of the example back to what I was talking about with the guy who's working in the Asian culture versus the African American culture. They had a more subdued way they dealt with things, and they wouldn't ask questions, you
Mm-hmm.
know, because they looked at that as being disrespectful or interrupting the instructor. So he thought he wasn't doing a good job, you know. But and it's funny because when you come in, like what you're talking about with these biasness, you don't know you're doing damage. These things are doing damage.
It
And from
is.
what it sounds like, just the three examples, what you gave, what we asking for right now, because defund the police and bring in more social workers and things like that. But the social workers are mostly white, female. So we're gonna have to change this whole system. We're gonna have to do a whole flip flop and figure out a way to
Well,
well,
I
we're
don't
gonna have to
know.
work on both.
I don't know if I mean I don't know necessarily need to be a whole flip flop with the social work field because like I said, it's within our code of ethics that we are have to do this, and most social workers want to do it. They want
Right.
to be, they are striving to end discrimination and stuff. They are wanting to work for the greater good. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a flip flop, but there needs to be a push and an expectation for them to become more culturally competent. That's what needs to happen. There needs to be a
Okay.
more push and expectation of that.
Okay, I can see
Because
that.
yeah, because it's necessary. If you're not, then you're not going along with the code of ethics. And if you aren't culturally competent, well, then you're incompetent as a worker. So you're not
Mm-hmm.
only being unethical, you're incompetent.
Mm.
You get
I,
what I'm saying? So
yeah.
it's very necessary, but it hasn't necessarily been really looked at. But I think we need to look at it because, like you said, we got two different institutions coming together here. and
Right.
we can't, we gotta, we're you know, we're not gonna, it's time that we don't allow people to overlook the racism. We need to be strong enough, even though when it's exhausting, mentally and emotionally exhausting, to constantly be standing up for it, we have to, or nothing, we won't make any type of change for the future. You know,
Right.
and maybe not right now, we won't make significant changes, but can we do something that will help our future generations? You know,
Yeah. I
again,
agree.
that's the social work thing. We're trying to work for the greater good to enhance human well-being. So that's just how we're supposed to do it. So I got three more demonstrations, and I really want to talk about these three, especially the last two, because the last two is really important, I think, to talk
And
about.
while you
So,
pulling that up, Eddie, he said that he did a video on the stats where he did a research, and he found out that blacks or African American were more likely to get arrested for a similar crime than versus say a white student or something. And we all know that. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
but
we get it,
but
Eddie.
we,
We
yeah,
get it.
we all know that. But it's a, and that's what I'm saying. It's amazing that we got to go out here and do research and write stuff out, do collect data and analyze it and put it in a graph for anybody to believe it.
Hey, Ida
You
B.
know.
Wells did that with the red book. That's it. And she was talking about the lynchings. That's exactly what she did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have to, you know, you, that's the only way for people to take things, you know, take what you're saying, take your word for it to really
Right.
believe what you're saying. So, um, so here we have the fourth demonstration, which is when there is a limited investment in creating partnerships with communities of color or program of service design, implementation, and evaluation. So what this would look like is, okay, so say there's trying to make like a family and child and family services more beha- neighborhood based. Okay, so they
Mhm.
want to make they're trying to put in efforts to make this more of a behavior based service, and you know, in the community. So within the neighborhoods, so they're going into the neighborhoods, specific neighborhoods, and trying to service specific neighborhoods. But say within those specific neighborhoods, they already have established grassroots programs that are predominantly ran by, you know, maybe people of that neighborhood, or
Mhm.
you know, African American people that have, you know, like that have came up in that neighborhood and have decided to start these own grassroots programs for that. So, and when doing that, they really worked hard at establishing a relationship, building trust, having positive rapport, and positive contacts with the community. The community relies on them. The community knows that they're there to help them, right? Integrity, all that. They worked really hard to establish relations, not just with the community members, but with the hospitals, with the schools, maybe with the police department, or the, you know, the police that patrol those neighborhoods. Maybe they, you
Mhm.
know, they worked really hard to establish themselves as an agency or as an organization that is here to help this, you know, their neighborhood, and be like a liaison for them, right?
Mhm.
But what usually happens is that agencies that are established but are ran by white people, predominantly ran by white people, and are nonprofits,
Mhm.
these agencies and organizations who have not done any type of work to establish any type of rapport or a relationship with those specific neighborhoods, they will be rewarded the support and funding to promote the service in that community, instead of just giving it to the not the grassroots programs that have in the community that have been doing the work and have been
Mhm.
doing it successfully. Why give it to them?
Right.
that their services that would be a better use of funding. They would expound upon the good work that they're doing, but instead you're going to give it to an agency that's predominantly ran by white people who don't know anything about that community.
Yeah, we seen that one before.
Yes, we have. And that's
Yeah,
why
yeah,
that's why I
yeah.
brought that one up, because man oh man, we have seen that
Seen that
almost
picture
like
before.
every year that happens here. Almost like
Mm.
every year there's a grassroots organization that is
Yep.
being completely overlooked for their good effort, and then this other nonprofit will get the funding and come in and try to take the program and not have effective work.
Yep.
Not have effective work. Yep, it
Yep.
happens. That's why I put it in there.
Yep.
So,
Oh,
um,
before
go
you
ahead.
read the other one, let me read this disclaimer right quick and then
Okay,
go
yeah,
into
yeah.
this next example. WRFU, this is Conscious Community Connection. I'm here with Alicia. Heather right now is busy. Schoolwork. Kee-Kee is busy right now. Damon, brother Damon, and we got brother Eddie always here. Eddie is our one of our undergrads that's coming in. But Conscious Community Connection, WRFU 104.5 FM. The views expressed here are the views only of the speakers, not of WRFU 104.5 or the Socialist Forum, IMC building. These are our viewpoints only. And I know I didn't read that verbatim because Heather got this thing down pat. And
She
usually she
does.
comes in like that little squirrel, like one of whack-a-moles, and she
Yeah.
pops out. But today she's not popping in because she needs to get that homework done. So Heather, you get to work on that homework. But go ahead and go to that next example, Alicia. Go ahead.
Okay, so the next example is with social workers of color experience micro inequalities proclaimed by their white social work colleagues. So this they gave an example of this in which they said that they had interviews that were
Mhm.
with social workers of color within major cities, and they talked about their experiences of bias among colleagues towards them. So they're talking about how other colleagues would perpetuate whatever or push whatever bias or prejudice that they have about their race on them. And
Okay.
so there were several reports of this, and it was independently of one another. So they interviewed these social workers by themselves, and most of them pretty much said that they were having they were perceiving that they perceived that their concerns, that whatever they said they had concerns with, that those concerns weren't important. So if they you know whatever they had a concern with, whatever they voiced out, it wasn't taken seriously. It was looked at as like was unimportant. However, if someone that was like, say they're one of their white colleagues, said they had the same type of concern or same type of observation, that it would be taken seriously if it was taken if they said that. So you understand what I'm saying?
Yep.
So yeah, okay. So um I've actually experienced this.
Yeah.
I've actually experienced this like in meetings and staffing meetings, where there would be a social worker of color that would share their observations about a client behavior and then share what they think that what approach or what strategy would work best to help that client or help minimize that behavior.
Mhm.
They would say that, and literally it was like completely ignored what they said. It's like no one even acknowledged that that person even spoke. And then all of a sudden, moments later, there'd be a white colleague that would say the exact same thing. And I'm and I'm sitting there, I noticed it, and so I'm looking back and I'm like, that's crazy. Like, did that just go down? And I'm looking at my colleague, and she's like, I just said that. I just said that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm just like, wow, that just happened. And that happened like every time we had a staff meeting. They just didn't. wouldn't acknowledge this one worker of color. I don't know. I mean, I don't know why they did that. I don't know, because she was there for a really long time. She had like 6 years of experience in that role at that
Mhm.
agency. I don't know why they would do that, you know. So I mean, but they did. It did. It happened. So and so the last example here, or the last situation I'm going to give, is when employment criteria and credentialing requirements often create barriers of unemployment, or and barriers of employment of social workers of color, and generally do not require demonstration of knowledge and skills required to effectively serve a culturally or linguistically diverse service population.
Yeah, you got to break
So,
that one down.
yes, so I'm going to. So, say a social worker, say a social worker, or say it's a hospital. Say
Okay.
the hospital, and they employ social workers, and the criteria is once a year after you get hired, you have to have passed a licensing exam.
Mhm.
So, say it is a hospital, and also say this is a hospital that works with a lower income population, and a lot of the population are immigrants. Okay, so on their staff that they have hired a Spanish speaking person and an African American person. The Spanish speaking person, perfect for working with that population because they work with immigrants, right? So if the primary language is Spanish, she can talk to them and relate to their culture, right?
Mhm.
But we're talking about credentialing. So she needs to get a license within 1 year of working there. It's going to be really hard for her to get that license if English is her second language.
Right.
And so they're saying that if you don't get it within the first year, we're going to fire you. And so they will. Agencies will. If you don't get it, you're fired. Not recognizing there is um, a cultural difference there that is creating a barrier for her to get that licensure. Agencies would do that, and even though that this worker is great and she does what she's supposed to do, and she's built a wonderful rapport with the community, and it's actually an asset to the community, to asset to the agency or the hospital to keep her around, they would fire her because of that. I don't understand why agencies do that, why they wouldn't help a worker like that to purchase the right study material to pass the test. Okay.
Right.
Or some agencies do actually do this, where they will pay for the test for you, so you don't actually have to pay for the exam, because those exams can be pretty pricey, especially if you fail and you have to retake it. But usually
Mhm.
they only pay for it once. But in this case, you
Okay.
know, if this person is having a language barrier, there needs to be some type of other thing going on there. Or maybe not make that such a strict protocol that, you know, you have to have that within the first year. You know, and being aware that, you know, a social worker like that has a skill set that maybe most of your other social workers don't have on your staff, and that they are, like I said, actually a bigger asset to the agency, and that they should be kept around. Say the African American social worker that they hired was one that grew up in an inner city neighborhood where the
Mhm.
quality of education was a little inferior to more affluent areas. So they didn't have the fundamental building blocks. Okay,
Right.
statistically, um, if you grew up in school systems that didn't really quite have um, the best type of technology, the best type of educational tools, statistically, your test scores are going to be lower than students that were in more affluent areas. Especially here in Illinois, when our property taxes, our schools benefit from our property taxes. Okay, so
Mhm. Mhm.
statistically, that worker is probably going to have lower test scores. And so, like I said, Yet, if this agency or this hospital is based in a lower income neighborhood, that
Hmm.
worker possesses a level of insight that other workers don't have. And
Exactly.
that is priceless when
Mm.
coming to, the practicing social work. And
Wow.
because, yeah, so, you have workers who are white and come from an affluent neighborhoods. They don't understand. But when you have a worker of color that isn't so affluent, they
Mm.
get the population of what you're working with. That they're more of an asset to the to the agency. And I've seen this happen a lot, where that I've seen this happen a lot where in the social work field, social workers kind of I've seen social workers kind of have to um, put on as if like they have their stuff all together, or like they didn't come from a disadvantaged background. I don't understand why that's such a. I don't understand why that's a negative when they would use that to their advantage, and they're actually probably one of the best social workers on the team because they understand their
Right.
clientele on a level that the other ones wouldn't understand. This also happens with social workers who were diagnosed with a learning disability when they're a child. So
Mm.
individuals that are diagnosed with learning disabilities, that isn't, there's a stereotype that if you have a learning disability, you're thought of as being stupid or dumb or something. Like, no, that's not true. Actually, children with learning disabilities are highly intelligent.
Very
They just maybe perceive information in a different way.
different.
Or you just have to learn a different strategies to teach them, but they're like highly intelligent. So you'll have workers here that might have been having dealing with a learning disability their whole life, and now when it comes to take this big exam, or when it comes to credentialing and stuff like that, they have a barrier and a blockage. We have a duty, and you should be listen. If you have workers here that deal with real life problems,
Yeah.
what type of agency would fire them for being for dealing with issues like that? You should be helping them overcome that. You should be promoting them to be the best worker that they can be in the field. That's the number
Right.
one cause of burnout in the field, is the worker not being promoted and not growing because their agency isn't promoting that growth.
Right.
So I don't why hold it against the social worker for having human problems? And you supposed to be out here working in the field with people.
Right.
You see how it's like a contradiction? Am I making sense? You see what I'm saying? It's like a contradictory.
Yeah.
Like I never understood that. So I mean, these are just some of the things that I wanted to just lay out and talk to you guys about as far as issues within the social work field pertaining to institutional racism. Like I said, I've worked in the social work field for a while. I love my career. I love being a social worker. And that's the reason why I'm talking about it. I love it so much that I want it to be better. And I want it to make progress. And I want the field to grow. And I want the workers to become more competent, especially when it comes to culture. So
So
that's all I got as far as
let
as
me
far
ask a question.
uh-huh.
After you taking that off the screen now, or what?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So I got a question. This whole thing right now, this push that everybody want to do, this push to defund the police, bring in more social workers. It don't sound like a good idea right now from what you're saying and looking at this picture, because I've been in those classes on the graduate level.
Mm-hmm.
And not only am I the only male, I'm the only black male there sometimes.
Yeah,
You know,
you are a
mostly
rarity in the
white
field.
women.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. I was the
Yeah.
only one in them classes. I said, wow. And you got, and most of them came from middle class or upper middle class. and they got this idea that they want to heal, they want to go heal the natives. you know, they want to fix it. We got to do something about it. But I was listening to some ideas, and I'm really, I'm considering something now after hearing you with this discussion. I'm considering. Uh, I've been asked to go back through a PhD program.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's dealing with this. This is the issue that there are not enough individuals who look like us in this field, and that you're not going to be able to turn this around until you get more of us in that field and dealing with them issues.
Right. And so, right. And I agree with that. But, in the meantime, while that's happening, like I said, there needs to be more of a push and a higher expectancy, a level of
Mm,
expectancy for social workers that are in the field to become more consciously aware of culture. Okay, to
okay.
gain that needs to happen, and not just for white social workers, all social workers, all social workers. I don't know
Yeah.
everything about race. I don't know everything about every culture. Just because I got brown skin, doesn't mean I understand it.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
I have to do that too. If I, it's like you said before, like you'll get someone on your caseload that's of a different culture. Instead of ignoring the fact that they're of a different culture than you need to understand their culture. Because that is a big aspect of who they are. Their race and their culture. Even though race is a social construct, it's still a really big aspect of who they are and how they,
now
live their life.
here's something interesting. I was listening to Kendi again last night. Ibram X, How to Be an Anti-Racist. So, and I didn't think of this. Now, affluent African Americans that's coming into this field who go to college are looking at um, poor African Americans as another culture.
Hmm.
Just because we are black don't mean we see it the same way.
I see
And they
that.
become judgmental, right? And they become very judgmental,
Mm-hmm.
and they
See,
actually do more damage.
and I feel like
That's another great.
that I feel like
Uh-huh.
that's another form of internalized racism or
It is.
that.
It
Yeah.
is. And I haven't thought of that because you thinking that everybody black, oh, this will be settled. No.
Right.
Now they're not coming from, and you gotta understand, most individuals that's going to college are coming from probably a middle class black family
Or at
that's
least
not
they
dealing
had
with it.
somehow they had some type of opportunity for them to get there. You know what I'm
Exactly.
something. They said some type of opportunity to get there that isn't typical, you know? Like
That's right.
if they're coming from a working class family or a family that's considered income, something happened. A teacher
Something
or
happened.
somebody saw
That's right.
potential. That doesn't happen to everybody.
That don't happen all the time. And this individual comes in with a superiority complex. Like, oh, you could do this. I did it.
You
That, and that
pull yourself up by your bootstrap. I'm
there you
telling
go.
you.
There you
Yeah.
go. And you get that. That comes into play. So we dealing with internalized racism. A lot of us got it, and it's not just white and black. It's black on black, but it's black coming from an upper class looking
Mm-hmm.
down on this lower class, which is a separate group or separate race.
It it
And I didn't
is.
think that. After looking at it, and man, we gotta dissect that video. We need to have a group viewing of that Kendi, How to Be an Anti-Racist, then have a
Yeah.
discussion following that. Because I never thought of that.
But it is. Again working in the social work field. Oh God,
Yeah.
I'm gonna say some things. I'm already gonna say this. And it might rub some people the wrong way if they listen to it. But I have encountered some African American people that I swear they are holding the black glass ceiling in place
Oh
to
yeah,
make sure
yeah,
no one else can bust through it. And I'm just
yeah,
like,
yeah.
what are
Oh, the
you
gatekeepers.
doing?
The gatekeepers is real, man. You know, we don't we this is not a myth. Gatekeepers are very real.
Yeah, yeah,
Gatekeepers are real. They exist.
yeah.
And we dealing
And
with
th-
that.
and they're probably the most dangerous.
Oh yeah, they are. To me, they are because one, they look like you, but just because you look like me don't mean you have my experiences or think like me. That's totally
Hmm.
different. And
Right.
gatekeepers are real, and it's a lot. It's a lot out here, and we got to figure a way around that. So this whole defund the police thing, and see, this is the questions we need to start asking right now. Just like when they was pushing that bill, I remember when they was pushing that bill to mandatory sentencing, three strikes laws, and all that crap you out. You know what they did? They put some black clergymen in front, and they was the ones talking about this bill will help us out. It'll help stop crime in our area. I remember that, and it turned and backfired on us. You know, this thing, the gun was already set to backfire on us. We need to actually look at, like you said, both these agencies, and then like you said, more training. Okay, that's fine. If we're gonna deal with that, let's add more training. I'm with that. But we're going to also look at getting people with that actual experience into these fields. And but
Well,
I
but
noticed
also,
this.
I
Mhm.
want to add to that before you go on. But
Okay.
the ones that are in the field that are actually just like that, how do we make it to where they are the ones that are now sitting in the roles of leadership? Because
Well,
their insight and
mhm,
their experience,
mhm.
like I said, it's invaluable for the field, and
It
that needs to
is.
kind of trickle down because they can give more awareness. They can challenge. They can, where people are being judgmental and biased, they can point it out and then say, well, why don't you look at it from a different perspective? Why don't you look at it from this? That could actually
Right.
dismantle a lot if we had people in leadership that had this understanding. You get what I'm saying?
I know. I know. I'm not sure how you're
It's
going to get that different
Well,
subgroup.
it's all at the top, and like I said before, with the field of social work, and even with the police, unless the people in power are mostly white, and unless they're able to, acknowledge and accept their own white privilege and make a commitment to take action towards um, being towards obtaining being successful in getting social injustice or having social injustice for not just for everyone,
Mhm.
there's really not going to be much of a change. And
Right.
you have to be committed to that. You have to recognize that, because when you do
Right.
recognize, when that is recognized, then they will be other more welcoming of people of color with a particular types of skill sets and expertise in those higher positions. You see what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, and that whole institutional racism thing, it's only going to trickle down into both these areas. We see that. There's no way of getting around it, especially if you're dealing with a field. Like I said, I was the only guy there and the only black guy there. Majority of the time, most of my classmates were 80 to 90% white Caucasian ladies. Where were the black ladies up in there? You know, and if it was a black lady in there from time to time, she was from another culture or like I said, a more middle class or affluent culture of African American, and she couldn't identify with that.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So how do you reach that group? Or how do you get that group to empower? And this group is already beat down. You're dealing with a group of individuals who beat down. who are they going from check to check. So how do you convince them that they have the skill set or they have the capability of competing? See, I didn't think I could compete for a long time, and I stayed away from school. I didn't go back to school until I was in my late 20s, early 30s.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but by that time, man, it's hard to get out here and get a job in there because now you kind of you seen it's over the hill, um, but and then I was forced into it because I kept trying to avoid it. I kept trying to go and just get a regular job, just a base. I was just surviving. That was it. I just want to survive. Give me a nice car, pay my bills. Every now and then, drink me a little sip and chill out. And smoke me some cigarettes and cool out and pay my bills. Now to tell me, hey man, why don't you go there and go to school and do all this? I'm not going to see the value in that or the time that I got to put into that. It took me being turned down in those general areas to say, okay, I'm going to go back and compete on this level. You
Right.
see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean that takes a lot, of personal strength and
Right.
resiliency. And not everybody has that level of personal strength and resiliency.
Exactly.
Everybody has it. I mean,
Well, and
so
you
that's
you
hard,
brought up
but
something else. You brought up a real good point because I know individuals who work with individuals who got what they call it, drinking problems. They work with narcotics and things like that.
addiction counseling and
Addiction.
stuff
Yeah,
like
they
that.
work addiction counseling. So, you need to have, I think you need to have more people who had experience with that type of field to come into that field and work with them individuals instead of somebody coming from upper class and then telling these individuals, oh, all you got to do is remember that dumbass commercial. This is your brain. This is drugs. Make
Yeah.
sure you throw that egg, or what was the other one? Just say no. That's the stupidest
Yeah.
commercial in the world. Who was that? Was that the Bush family pushed that?
The Dare program.
Yeah, that old dumb commercial
Who
talk.
was it? It was the one of the first ladies. What was her?
Just say no.
Roosevelt? Was it Roosevelt? No.
No, I thought it was Bush, one of them talking about that just say no stuff. It was one of them,
No, it
but
wasn't Roosevelt. That's too long ago. I don't know.
yeah, it had to have been one of them. It was either the Bush or either, but that was the dumbest
Maybe it
program.
was Reagan. Maybe it was Reagan or something.
Yeah, just
I
say
don't know.
no. Yeah,
Yeah, it
yeah.
was Reagan. Yeah,
It was
Reagan.
dumb. It was retarded because um, who would even, you're
It
not
was.
looking at the factors would play a part in that community. Like coming from, let's say, South Side, West Side, Chicago, in the projects, right? Um, drugs were used as what's the word? They were used on occasions to just be a part of the group. Just to be a part of the group, you're gonna take you a hit of the joint or something or a drink. Because you don't want to be you don't want to be antisocial or desocialized, right? So you would use these things to fit in, and then
Well, like Eddie is saying, yeah, the Dare program actually led kids to to use drugs instead of.
yeah, it was stupid, man. It was the
It
dumbest
actually gave.
dumbest damn thing I ever
I
seen.
mean, it wasn't effective on me. I mean,
It wasn't. It didn't help me.
I
And
did
you
my
know that
fair
other
share of
one?
experiment stuff when I was
Right. No,
younger.
I think that
We
other
did
dumbest
it.
one, that other dumb one, the one they used to take the egg and crack it.
Yeah, this is your brain. This is your
This your
brain on
brain.
drugs.
Then they
Any
crack the egg,
questions?
this your brain on drugs. Nuts
It
see
was it was
what
hilarious. A lot like didn't you laugh at it? Like it
the
was
hell was that? You just made an omelet. That's all you did. You just showed me how to make an omelet. You ain't, what the hell this got to do with drugs?
But you're
Who
right
thought of that
though.
stuff, right?
But you're right though. You're right about that. About how with addiction counselors, that is a type of approach that they it's actually it's they say it's more effective when you have someone who struggled with that
Right.
addiction, and then they become a counselor and actually help other people that are going through recovery. So yeah, that's what Narcotics Anonymous is, Alcohol Anonymous is,
Okay.
sponsor and things like that. Is it's somebody that's kind of helping you go through that process because they know what it's like to go through that.
Right.
They have possess a level of empathy that a non-user doesn't have, and an understanding and awareness of it. So yeah, I agree. Definitely, if we could, if they would be the social work field or the police force, if the city councils would
Mhm.
be so open to allow professionals that that possess the education level, but also the experience of being a part of the community in which they are trying to help, which they are trying to mend,
Mhm.
in to help this to help them to educate them on how to, you know, help the community. I agree. That is something that definitely would be beneficial here because
Right.
you're talking to a group of people that are completely out of touch with the population of people that they're trying to work with.
Right. So what I'm thinking is what it sounds, those examples that you gave were excellent. So I'm thinking that we need to adopt that model into the social work because right now the whole push is defund the police, bring in more social workers. But if you got white middle class women,
Mm-hmm.
majority as social workers, we only going to be experiencing the same problem again. Because you get these individuals that come into your community and they do a more they instead of listening to you, like you was talking about using the strength-based model.
Mm-hmm.
That example what you gave was excellent. Now that strength-based model looks at, does this individual have family? Are they connected to the community? Are they with a church? What type of church is it? What type of resources this church have? But that's ignored. And like you said, it was a black social worker who was giving them that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go over that again. Go over that again. That
So this was an example that I found in the research paper that I used to help with this presentation. But this is actually, but that is so it's funny that that example was actually an example that I experienced when working in at a social work agency. So let me find that example. Where is it at? Okay, so this is when the situation was, when support is given to policies and practices without the analysis of the racial effect. An example was of an African American experienced clinician working in a agency in a mental health program finds that assessment of black families and children do not adequately consider the positive social cultural aspects of black families. So that's like the strengths of the black families,
okay.
it doesn't adequately assess them, so it doesn't take them into consideration, it doesn't acknowledge them
Mhm.
adequately. Okay, so when the African American worker raises these concerns with the white program leader, she's frequently told that she is missing clinical aspects of what is involved
So she's told by the white worker that she's not evaluating this right.
by her white leaders. So it's not like a worker where it's like your colleague. It's a program leader. So like the person that's leading the program, your boss, your supervisor, and they would be telling her that her that she's missing the clinical aspects of what's involved. So it's pretty much saying that you're focusing too much. I've heard this. You're focusing too much on race,
Mm,
and that's not a clinical aspect.
okay.
But it is.
Wow.
You look, if you
Right.
aren't taking into consider if you are not considering race when building these programs, just like now when we're
Uh-huh.
talking about with the social work program and the police, and we're gonna mess that. They have people working on that. I think who Rosecrans and what's his name, dude that does the thing.
Yeah, we don't want. I stay away
Yeah.
from names right now, but go ahead. I got you.
Well, they're supposed to come together, right?
Okay. Oh, you talking about the homeless guy?
Yeah. So they're supposed
Yeah.
to come together, and they're supposed to come together and work together to from my understanding, I think I got this right, so don't quote me on this, but from my understanding, they're supposed to come together because they're supposed to have some pilot program in next year that's going to do this, right? That's
Right.
going to that's going to test this out, the police and the social workers. And my thing is though, I'm worried about that. I don't know if they are taking in consideration the cultural aspects.
Hmm.
I don't know if they're taking in consideration the racial aspects that need to be taken into consideration when developing a program. Because if they're
Right.
not, just like all the other programs out here that haven't
They're
done
gonna
that,
backfire.
it's the program won't be as effective as it could be
Hmm.
in the community. It won't be as effective as it could be. And that you know, why don't you eliminate that risk and just, make sure that you're taking the racial aspects into consideration, you know? And I mean, and if they don't know how to do that, then you get somebody involved that does.
Right.
You get what I'm saying? Because
Right.
the programs are effective to the overall community, but they're not that effective to people of color. I'm not saying that they aren't effective. They're just could be more effective and they could be
Well,
more helpful.
well, we see that now here in Champaign. We seeing a recent rise in shootings. So they got Fresh Start, a couple other programs they had. It's not slowing it down. They tossed a lot of money at it, but they don't. Again, they're missing the cultural aspects of it.
Yeah, they
You know, you're
are.
missing that.
They
Once you're missing
are.
that piece, you can't solve this problem. All you're gonna be doing is keep starting over and starting from ground zero, trying to work your way into a community. And guess what? It's not gonna work. So, but I think where we at on time, we right at. I think we had time.
Yeah, we're at
Yeah,
time.
but
Yep.
we had you had some comments on there. You want to read a couple of them? Did you have some on there? Anybody? Did you? Can you see it?
Uh, yeah. Danny said one of
Mhm.
the social workers' functions is empowering the family by finding the strengths within the family. Yeah. Yep. We talked about that earlier. You're absolutely right. That is one of the functions of social work. Absolutely. And doing a strength based approach with that. Um, so Danny's also talking about how learn, saying that, are you saying that social workers and the police in general need to learn different cultures? I
Yeah,
mean, I agree with that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. They're gonna have to. They're gonna have to have this on a continuous basis if they're gonna be dealing with these communities, or else we're gonna keep seeing the same thing. And just like in the schools, like I said, the schools, they seemed like they was targeting African American men, young men here on a regular
Mm-hmm.
basis, but that was just because they're not looking at these young, or they see these young men as being aggressive,
Mm-hmm.
and they but they coming from a culture where being aggressive is survival, so it's misunderstood, or he's talking back, just like you said, he's talking back, but he's not listening. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's a whole learning system. So we got a lot more to ask for on the table here, just
Yeah.
to defund these police. But we got a lot of questions we need to ask. And this time, when they sit down and draw up these programs, we need to be at not only at the table, we need to be at the drawing board.
Right, right, exactly. And yeah, so yeah, and that's what I was saying about, and I think it is see you at home, Eddie. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. Like, not criticizing anybody and what they're doing and their work to put this together or to come together and try to figure out how to do this pilot program, because that's going to take a lot of work. And to anybody that's doing that, a lot of props and respects for it. But it just, I do wonder, as a community member, as a social worker here in this county, are they taking that? Are they taking those racial aspects into consideration? And I think it's a legitimate question. And I think, we as a community have the right to know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I
So,
think I think it depends on who's at that table. We'll know if they taking it seriously, and let's say they call in somebody. I would say even Marlon Mitchell.
mm-hmm.
I would know they taking it serious because they know this guy's serious. And he's working in the community. And he understands the community, and he's
Yep.
educated enough to write the policies.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So it
Seriously.
depends on who's at that table. Is it
Mm-hmm.
a gatekeeper or is it somebody who's actually out for the
Preach.
community?
And I think we kind of can identify who the gatekeepers are. They've been around for a while.
And they non-effective. They're around, but they non-effective. So we
Yeah.
need to see who's at that table. Who is at that table making these decisions?
Right.
That's going to determine if this thing is going to be effective or not, or who is just there just to get a check.
Right. And maybe,
So,
yeah, right. Eddie says, I believe when it comes to police and social work, more vetting and specialized diversity training has to happen. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Yep.
yep.
Yeah.
So,
The road to
well,
hell is paved with good intentions. Preach. That's true.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna say this, man. This has been a good discussion, and I thank you for your research
Yeah.
um, and the presentation, how you set it up, because it was very informative. And
Good. Thank you.
I
Great.
think we can learn a lot, and we need to send this to some of them individuals who are going to be making this decision, I believe, and let them hear this. And it needs to come more. Like I said, we need to get more voices from the community.
Mm-hmm.
But there's there's a process that needs to happen, and the next stage needs to go down is a structuring process and organize. Going back to that last book that King wrote, where do we go from here? He was talking about it. You got to get organized in these communities. The community's gonna have to get organized and bring in their own voice, and that's next. That's the next step as far as setting up the structure. No, then we can start bringing people to the table. But we got to also look at culture. I think Amos Wilson, he did a great job. It's a presentation he did. You can look at it. It's called Culture Answer Questions or
Mm-hmm.
Culture Solve Questions, Solve Problems. Culture Solve Problems. Everybody needs to check that out because it was talking about how the culture of a culture develops to solve problems. Like when we talk about Spanish culture, how they get together, certain things. All these things are designed to solve a issue. So we need to now enforce our culture,
Mm-hmm.
then structure, get organized. Because you keep hearing this thing every year. Somebody say we need to get together. Black people need to get together. No, I don't think we need to get together because all of us ain't on the same page. The ones on the same page need to get together. The other ones that's right now on that page, we can't worry about that right now. Because getting everybody together and all y'all not on the same page ain't nothing gonna get done. You know,
Mm-hmm. I
that's what
agree.
I'm saying. So,
I
but
agree. Do you want to do a disclaimer before you close out?
yeah, I'm gonna do a disclaimer. You have one last thing you want to go with, and then I'm gonna do the
Uh,
disclaimer and close it.
no. We'll probably come back in a couple of weeks, and we're gonna discuss some more topics. Um, on the same line of
Oh,
racism,
how,
institutional racism, huh?
how about this? Like you said, we'll come back a couple of weeks. We'll cover everything, put it in a nice format, a summary. We'll
Mm-hmm.
summarize it, and then we'll go over it, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, yeah, we can do that. We definitely can do that before we move on to, because I do want to talk about internalized racism as well. But we can, maybe we need to just take a break and kind of discuss it a little more so everybody can digest what we've been talking about for the last several weeks. So yeah, that sounds good. But we'll be back in a couple weeks for
All
sure.
right, that'll work. Well, y'all, hey, this been fun. Alicia, pleasure. Conscious Community Connections, WRFU 104.5 FM. Is a socialist forum. The views expressed here are of the our personal views. They are not of the stations. So don't go over there talking about, man, I heard TYgar say this to say that. Nope, these are my own views. Or Alicia said this. Nope, these are Alicia's own views. So on that note, out to Heather, Kee-Kee, brother Damon out there, and they always doing good work. We did a real good job on the giveaway too, man. We gave away over 100 bags and different things like that. School supplies. We got some other things we want to plan. So we got a fundraiser coming up. You guys be able to help us with that. You will see more on it soon. But I'm gonna say this: peace, prosperity. Have a great night and enjoy your holiday weekend. Because what's this? Monday is no work, right?
Right.
Man, I'm gonna get tore up. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I don't even drink or nothing, man. I'll be my tour version of drinking some juice and laying on the couch watching TV all day. So
I was gonna say I'm old. I'm gonna sleep. I am so excited to sleep. I'm so excited.
oh yeah. Hey, that sleep be feeling good. You be
Oh
like,
yes. Oh
don't even
yes.
worry. But it's been a pleasure, man. We're gonna be out and y'all take care and be peaceful out there.
Yes. Have a good weekend, everybody.
All right.
Bye.
All right.